What up? We've got our updated Poison Pathfinder League start guide for you here today. We wanted to go ahead and get this out now so you can start practicing and planning for the coming League start. We've done a couple of runs through the campaign now on Poison Pathfinder, and this build is awesome. It's so good. We do also realize several other content creators are playing the build that we've known and loved as their League starter. Cool. All the gear is self-craftable. I know people are concerned about costs. Sorry, you can craft the gear yourself. You don't really need any uniques. It's fine. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into it, but first be sure to like, subscribe, and hype this video if you're on mobile. Just go ahead and do it. It helps more people see our content, which helps us keep doing this. Join our Discord as well. We've got a great community there. Alright, let's start with a Poison Pathfinder sales pitch. It's super easy to play. For the most part in maps, you just run around right-clicking stuff and then it's all dead. You're also able to do all map mods. The build is slow immune, so Chilled Ground and Temp Chains don't do anything to you. The damage is good in the campaign, and the damage is amazing in maps. It is solo self-farm viable as well. It's extremely tanky with good gear. The build also got huge buffs in patch 0.4. Contagious Contamination, which was the kind of boring, not really that good poison spreading node, was totally removed, which frees up 2 Ascendancy points. Practical Remedies was a terrible node that was also removed. Again, that's like 2 free points if you wanted to come up and take Sustainable Practices, which is a good node if you're well geared, really adds a lot of defensive value. That's only 2 points now instead of 4, so it suddenly becomes a really good option. But wait, there's more. Running Assault now grants cannot be heavy stunned while sprinting, which means this is the fastest build in the game. You can sprint everywhere in between packs. You can even come over here and take these nodes, Marathon Runner and maybe Agile Sprinter as well, and now you have even more move speed while sprinting. There's also a rune that grants move speed while sprinting, a Boots rune. You can double the value of that, and this means you can get over 100% increased move speed out of sprinting, which is completely insane. This is going to be great for speed farming maps, which is huge for the new temple mechanic. It's also easier to justify not using Roa, but then you have more defenses available to you if you do choose to use Roa, if you choose not to take Running Assault with the Traveler's Wisdom node, that allows you to get 5% increased global defenses on every single one of these, like 5 dex, 5 strength, 5 int nodes. You could swap those out for global defenses. So that totally changes the way that you would gear this build at like super high gear levels. It's not necessarily something that you have to do, not mandatory, but just if you have outgeared the need for Running Assault, now you have the potential to be like the tankiest build of all time. So to talk about our written guides, we have a POB and a quick rundown of the build over on Mobalytics, and then a full written guide on PoE Vault. Both of those will be linked in the video description, and they will be updated as POB gets updated and as we progress the build throughout the league. One quick note about POB. The current version of POB hasn't been updated yet. This is not Local Identity's fault or anybody who works on POB. GGG hasn't given them the JSON required to update the build because they're still working on it too. We will update both guide pages as soon as the POB update happens, but we can't do it before then. So this will affect some things that I mentioned later. And speaking of mentioning things, we put out a Poison Pathfinder Q&A video yesterday. It answers most of the commonly asked questions that we've received in talking about and hyping up this build and streaming it over the last week or so. We tried to compile them all here and put them into one single video, so I'm going to try not to hit on any of those again during the rest of this video guide. I'm sure it'll happen just organically. Alright, let's talk a little bit about how Poison Pathfinder works in the campaign. So for the first 14 levels, you're going to use Lightning Arrow and Lightning Rod as your 2 primary skills. You'll just run around shooting Lightning Arrow to kill packs of enemies, and then throw Lightning Rods down into bosses, and then shoot them with Lightning Arrow to trigger the Lightning Rods. You're going to do this all the way up through the Executioner at the very least, because Poison just doesn't work, essentially, in the first 14 levels. You're going to do very, very little damage. It'll actually be worse than just bow shots. Once you're able to get some passives and also unlock Toxic Growth, which you get at level 14, level 5 Gem, is what you get for your reward for killing the Executioner, then you're able to start playing Poison and actually do boss damage and have some AoE damage, and that's when the build all comes online. For your first Spirit Gem, which you get from King of the Mist at like level 10 or 11, you should still take Plague Bearer. It is worth taking that because you're going to be using that all campaign long. It's, again, completely fine to take that even though you're not using Poison yet. Now, some people may want to wait all the way up until the first Ascendancy to swap over to Poison. You could run Lightning Arrow and Lightning Rod up through Act 2 if you want, but for us, we're swapping at level 14. That's the point where we make the swap, kill Count Geonor with Poison, Toxic Growth, all of that, and it works great. From there on, the way you play Poison Pathfinder for the rest of the campaign is pretty much the way I'm doing it on screen right now. You run around shooting Poison Burst Arrow at packs of mobs, and you can also hit them with Plague Bearer. If it's a big AoE pack, you can hit them with Plague Bearer, and that'll do them. That's pretty much it. Just right-click, and then sometimes you hit them with the Plague Bearer. That's clearing. Now, for killing big bosses, big special enemies, you can use Toxic Growth. You can use Plague Bearer to trigger all the Toxic Growth pods at once. That works, and that's what you're going to do for, killing Count Geonor. Once you unlock Gas Arrow in Act 2, you can throw Gas Arrow down and then shoot Toxic Growth into it, and that will automatically cause the Toxic Growth pods to spawn and explode and do a bunch of damage. The only issue with Gas Arrow is that it will explode if it's set on fire. You're able to fix this once you get into Act 3 and you start getting some level 3 support gems by just making a Persistent Ground 2. This should be your first priority among level 3 support gems because it just fixes Gas Arrow, fixes boss damage completely. Very easy to deal with. So actually doing, running Gas Arrow as your main damage skill, it just isn't very good in map clearing, and it isn't very good in single target, so it's really only there to trigger Toxic Growth. And just to talk a little bit about Toxic Growth and Poison Burst Arrow. Poison Burst Arrow, it's a very simple skill. It just shoots an arrow, it does a little explosion, and applies poison to everything it hits. And it can fork, and those will also shotgun onto nearby enemies. That's why we're able to, shoot a Poison Burst Arrow into a pack of enemies and get, a bunch of clear out of it. These annoying proximal tangibility monsters aren't really helping with that, but yeah, that's pretty much it for Poison Burst Arrow. It's super simple. It's very close to just being a basic attack, except it has built-in 100% chance to poison. Toxic Growth is very different. It shoots these pods on the ground, and then they just kind of sit there and do nothing until you poison them with another skill. That's really where Gas Arrow comes in. Plague Bearer kind of helps with that too, for a little while. Vine Arrow is a skill you can use. You can shoot it out and poison it with other skills. It doesn't actually seem like it does a lot of damage in our testing and our runs through the campaign. Using it versus not using it, it doesn't really seem that great. It seems to only apply a percentage of the damage dealt by one of your poisons, but it does apply a slow, so you can use it to make monsters a little bit easier to control while you're fighting them. That's kind of all it does. It is getting a small buff in the coming league where you'll be able to have multiple down at a time without using supports that then weaken their damage, so that's something not huge. Another thing that's changing in patch 0.4 is Toxic Growth will only shoot out 4 pods at a time instead of 8. This is not a problem. Right now, the way it works is you have a limit of 8, and as you can see, I'm firing them. Sometimes they will not explode before you get a new set out, so you're not actually summoning 8 with every cast. This is a problem. You can essentially just be sitting there shooting and losing damage. This is not going to be an issue in patch 0.4 because the cap is being raised up to 12 and the attack speed is being increased slightly, so it's actually just going to wind up being better because all the damage from this really comes from the poison, and as soon as you get 8 stacks of poison, it doesn't really matter whether you're shooting 4 or 8 at a time, so maybe it'll take you 2 attacks to get up to max stacks. Maybe it won't, depends on how this works with plus projectiles, which is going to be something that'll be available more easily in the passive tree in patch 0.4, so this may actually just wind up being a straight buff, but at the very least it's just a quality of life increase without any real nerfs. Now as for how this build works in maps, I'll just kind of jump into a map and talk about it as I go. As I mentioned before, you're able to do all map mods. By the time we kind of got to the end of the lifespan of this character, I wasn't even looking at map mods, and yeah, you won't have to either. You can run them all, no issue. So this character is set up to use Roa. I'm just not bothering at the moment just to get more of an approximation of what it'll be like, but essentially you just run around right-clicking everything until it dies. In maps, it's incredibly simple, and then when you get to bosses, it's actually the same basic rotation. Gas Arrow, Toxic Growth, repeat. The only other thing that gets added in is Stormcaller Arrow, which allows you to get a very, very large shock on bosses. You can get upwards of 80% shocks on bosses, but easily 60-70%, and that just works with poison. It just gives you 60% more damage on the boss with all sources, including your poison damage, and Yeah, that winds up being really good. And just to show off what a boss looks like, this is a max level upgrade boss, like a tier 4 map boss. And yeah, it died pretty quickly. This is a crit based build, so sometimes you can like low roll on your crit chance or whatever and like actually take a little longer, but normally bosses die in like 5 seconds or something. It's pretty quick. And on that note, let's talk a little bit about the way that you scale damage with this build. We have kind of written this up in a big long list in the Mobalytics guide, and I think it's worth restating here as well. First off, it scales with your physical damage and with your chaos damage. There aren't a lot of sources of chaos damage, that's fine, but there are sources of physical damage. Bow is a good one, damage with bow skills, added physical damage to attacks from like quiver rings and gloves, skill gem levels, and then there's a bunch of other poison specific stuff, poison stacks, poison magnitude, ailment magnitude, damaging ailment magnitude. Crit and crit bonus work with poison in this game. They don't in PoE 1 by default, but they do in PoE 2. And then there are a bunch of other stats as well. Poison duration, poison deals damage faster. I already mentioned shock and chaos damage, and then just a bunch of generic sources of like increased physical damage, attack damage, and projectile damage all apply to your poison. The things that don't apply to poison, and you shouldn't try to prioritize, especially during the campaign, are things like added elemental damage. Unless you get lucky and you get a plague finger early, this is basically added elemental damage is just like completely 0 value. Attack speed also is like 0 value for this, which is very different from like lightning arrow or ice shot or any other bow build basically. It just doesn't add DPS. It feels good to attack faster, but that's literally all it does. Chance to poison also is totally worthless because you have 100% chance to poison on all your skills. And increased chaos damage only works with direct chaos damage, so if you're using something that gives you a bunch of flat chaos damage like Voltaxic Rift, then increased chaos damage is good. Otherwise, it's basically worthless. Alright, now let's go ahead and move to the passive tree. So in the PoB and in the 2 written guides, we have breakdowns for like all of the leveling. And it's very simple. You want to come over and take Crippling Toxins. That'll give you a bunch of increased poison damage. Then Stacking Toxins, you'll basically be able to get both of those bonuses like roughly around the time that you're making the swap over to poison. You'll be kind of looking at both of those bonuses. Then I think it's kind of worth it to get some move speed out of Escape Velocity here. And then you're just going to take a bunch more damage and poison related stuff. Low tolerance is maybe like the one questionable thing. It gives you a bit more damage as you're just kind of running around in campaign zones, zipping through. It's pretty good. This bonus right here, Leeching Toxins, recover 2% of max life when killing a poisoned enemy, helps a lot with sustain. So this is like a pretty big quality of life bonus as you're progressing through the campaign, and then you'll make it to in-game, early in-game, and then our final in-game tree may change as we kind of get there, but this is like a level 96 tree, right? So you're not going to be like getting there day 1 of the league anyway, but we're doing a bunch of stuff with like weapon swapping and weapon set 2 being like our poison setup to make use of Rigvald's Ferocity, and then weapon set 1 getting a bunch of magnitude of shock to make those shocks be like 70% shocks instead of 20%. So that's a passive tree, pretty straightforward. And now we can talk a little bit about the Ascendancy order. So this is something that's one of the things that's going to be changing in the coming league. Your first 2 points obviously aren't going to go into Contagious Contamination because it doesn't exist anymore. Instead, they're going to go into Overwhelming Toxicity because it doubles your damage. After that, you're going to take Relentless Pursuit and then Running Assault. Those make sense as your second and third Ascendancy. I don't think it's worth it to give up Overwhelming Toxicity to have Running Assault. After that, you kind of have some options. Traveler's Wisdom is no longer the name of the passive that gives you a bunch of extra points and lets you like allocate starting at Warrior or Sork's spot. That's now called Pathseeker, but that makes the most sense, most generically useful. Final Ascendancy node. So that is ultimately the order we're going to recommend. Poison with your first 2, movement with your next 2, second and third Ascendancy, and then Traveler's Wisdom, or whatever the equivalent is, Pathseeker, with your final one. Alright, now let's talk a little bit about gear. So we'll start with some like useful uniques. Sliver Tongue is really, really strong. This is a bow you can use all the way from like level 39, Act 3, through the end game. Like you can use this all the way through doing even like tier 4 Uber bosses if you get enough physical damage elsewhere. It has all the quality of life stuff that you would want. Huge amounts. It adds a huge amount of crit chance. It adds a bunch of physical damage leached as life and mana, which is great for sustain. So your poison damage isn't able to leech, but the actual hit from Poison Burst Arrow is physical damage, and that counts as enough damage to be able to make you leech. The built-in Fork and the built-in Pierce are amazing for clear out of Sliver Tongue, and they also kind of free up a support gem slot. Like right now we run Fork in our Poison Burst Arrow, and you should do that throughout the campaign, but if you get a Sliver Tongue, you can drop that and just run Heft instead for more physical damage. So Sliver Tongue can be replaced with a Rare Bow. Rare Bows are going to do more single target damage at high end, but they're like more costly to craft. This may be a little bit of an expensive unique at the league start. That wouldn't be surprising, but it's pretty common. It's a leveling unique. It's not actually going to be that hard to get your hands on one. Maybe you could even chance one. Don't know that it's really worth doing that, but it will not be that hard to get a Sliver Tongue once the league is well underway. Plague Finger's another one. Again, kind of mentioned it already. It allows you to use elemental damage for poison damage build-up. It's something that people build whole in-game builds around, but we're not really going that direction. You can, but we're not. Corpse Wade is just like a very simple AoE clear leveling unique. Not anything mandatory, but kind of cool. Snakebite is really only useful for the fact that it gives you +1 poison, so it's like a good single target damage increase, but you're probably better off just getting like flat added physical damage, that kind of thing on rare gloves at high end, but like this is useful in the campaign if you get lucky and you find them. It'll add some boss damage, help you get through some of those Act 3 and Act 4 bosses. And the Voltaxic Rift is the other unique bow that's an option. It's basically all the opposite things of Sliver Tongue. Sliver Tongue has all of this great utility, and then it has terrible actual base damage. Voltaxic Rift has no utility, really. I guess it allows you to shock, which is good, but it's just all damage, and it also makes it so that you have trouble leeching, like you're going to have to get a lot of physical damage elsewhere in order to be able to leech mana and have it do anything, because chaos damage, you can't leech off of that under any circumstances. So it's a little bit jankier to use Voltaxic Rift than Sliver Tongue, but it is a great option for really nuking bosses if you want to use that in the end game. As for the rest of your gear, you just kind of want all the normal stuff, like a bunch of evasion rating and energy shield, life. In the current state of this build, you will only need 20 spirit, so you won't need a full 60 spirit, so that frees up a lot of like stat budget on your body armor prefix, then just as much like life and resistances and energy shield and evasion as you can get. All pretty valuable stuff. Flat physical damage is really, really huge for scaling your damage on the build, so like getting that everywhere that you possibly can helps a ton. Same with gem levels. Alright, we've kind of already mentioned the skills that you'll use at the start of leveling. Once you get into Act 2, it's going to be, or level 14 and beyond, it's going to be Poison Burst Arrow, Toxic Growth, Plague Bearer, and then Gas Arrow once that becomes available early in Act 2. And then that's pretty much it for the rest of the campaign. Your second aura that you'll pick up at whatever level it is, Act 3, level 30 something, is going to be Herald of Plague. That will bring back the poison spreading that you lose from that being removed from the Poison Pathfinder Ascendancy, or the Pathfinder Ascendancy. And Herald of Plague actually works a little bit better than that built-in poison spreading from Pathfinder. It actually has a longer range, and it has like a built-in chance to hinder enemies, so it actually, like I said, winds up being stronger than it was. The only other thing that you really add in that's like kind of fancy in endgame is Herald of Blood, and you're able to use Bleed rank 3 on your Poison Burst Arrow to make all of the physical damage it deals generate bleed, and then you can use Herald of Blood along with Poison rank 3 on that to cause your Herald of Blood to poison enemies. That then gets spread by Herald of Plague, which causes them to explode. You have a bunch of other things working in here as well, like Bursting Plague on Poison Burst Arrow, and also on Herald of Blood, so you just get like a bunch of bleed and poison spreading and clearing out of that, and it's all pretty much automatic, and it feels insane. Then for defenses, you have Wind Dancer and Ghost Dance. Pretty classic combo, very simple. Alright, last couple of things to mention here are mana. You do want Mana Leech. That does help a lot with sustaining mana in single target. You just use a Life Flask during the campaign, it's fine. And then the thing that will help you sustain mana in maps is 1 Sapphire, at least with 2% of mana on kill. That's it, right? That and the combination of Mana Leech will keep you going. And you'll never have to think about mana as long as you're not like just shooting the air. It'll be completely fine. As for the campaign bonuses, these are in the PoB, and they're very simple, right? Just, we always go stun threshold, we always go resistances, and then for the final bonus, the one from the Interlude 2, take resistances initially, and then go back and take global defenses later once you're geared up and you don't need that anymore. Alright, that's Poison Pathfinder. It's an incredibly strong build, it's going to be a lot of fun to play in the coming league, and we're extremely hyped to do so. Now let's finish off with a question like we like to do. What is your favorite breakfast meat? Sunset's favorite is bacon, though she doesn't really have it that often because she's not really a breakfast person. I am. I kind of like them all. Sausage I thought was my favorite, then it was ham. I just had some Canadian bacon earlier today that kind of made me question everything, so I just genuinely don't know anymore. Anyways, what's yours? Let us know in the comments section. Alright, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and join the Skipping Sleep Studio Discord and become part of our community. And finally, thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us and help us make more PoE content, consider becoming a channel member. Thanks for watching. Bye.